this moment, I think, colleagues, good afternoon to all of you. And one of the moments has arrived. It's this birthday. Welcome to Prof. Koopman's birthday celebration. The Dean will do the official welcoming to all the colleagues who are here. Professor Koopman is one of our colleagues at the Faculty of Theology, but is also in our rectorate at the University of Stellenbosch. The Dean will now take over. I will call our Dean, Professor Reginald, who's the Dean of our Faculty of Theology, to do the welcoming of all the guests and the family, and also our speakers from abroad, and everybody who is joining us this afternoon. Professor Reginald, if you are here, I would like to give this to you, and then you do the welcoming.
Thank you, Ubreha. I appreciate the opportunity, and it is a very special day for all of us present here. I just want to make sure, is Professor Koopman here? Because I think it's important that we for a moment, Professor Koopman. So Nico en Scotty, ek dink dis belangrik dat ons ook tog vir Scotty, dis belangrik dat ons Scotty ook erken. Maar dit is vir ons, I think it is for us a wonderful, wonderful privilege to celebrate your life today, to celebrate who you are, Nico, what you mean to us, and what you embody, who you are. If there's one concept that is important as we reflect on your significant, I see also Obi from the Netherlands joining us today. Welcome, Obi, welcome. If there's one thing that we want to reflect on today is your embodiment. Who you are as a person. And in many ways, and I wouldn't want to take away from what many of our colleagues will say, but in many ways, who you are on paper, who you write, who you speak about, is also who you are as a person. And that's what we appreciate for today and want to celebrate today. In all vulnerability, en broosheid is jou woord wat jy vir ons leer, en ook terwyl ons saam stap, is dit ook belangrik dat ons by tye ook vir jou celebrate en vir jou vier. So we are excited. This is of course a big surprise to you, but we have many of your friends around the world here gathered today. But Nico and Scotty, we also want to be mindful of the fact that during the last week or so that you also had some bereavement within the family, and we are aware, it reminds us of our vulnerability, né? Het herinner ons daaraan dat ons as mens, ons is broos. En daarom wil ons ook vir julle as familie ook ons innigste meegevoel betuig. Jou familie self, Scotty se familie. And we, we want to walk with you. Saam stappend wil ons saam met julle wees. En daarom is ons ook sensitief vir daardie werklikheid en daardie seisoen waarin julle ook as familie is, waarin ons is as familie. Colleagues, allow me in these moments also to welcome and to acknowledge our rector, Professor Wim de Villiers, to acknowledge Dr. Setri Nyomi, our colleague from Ghana, formerly the General Secretary of the World Community of Reformed Churches, which we are now called Wêreldbond van Gereformeerde Kerke in Afrikaans, former Dean of the Faculty of Theology, Professor Elna Maton, the Bishop and the Professor Heinrich Bedford-Strom, who we've already now seen on the screen. A warm welcome to you, Professor Heinrich Bedford-Strom, a friend of Professor Koopman, a colleague in the, especially in the Global Network for Public Theology. I also noted the presence of the current moderator of the Uniting Reformed Church, Dr. Llewellyn McMaster, the former moderator of the Uniting Reformed Church here in the Cape, Reverend Peter Grove is also here. Many of the people that you know, Dr. Renier Kugelenberg, as well as Dr. Des Lambrechts, who represents also, you know, the Anglican Church. And so I can go on. I've seen Professor Eddie van der Borg of the Vrye Universiteit in Amsterdam there, where Obi Phillips is now also tuning in today. Obi, ons sien vir jou. And colleagues, Professor Rodney Chaka, the director of the School of Humanities there at UNISA, colleagues who have joined us today and want to make this also a very special day for you. So I've been given only a few minutes. I've been asked by the organizers not to be long, and we can talk the whole day. But today we want to celebrate. Today we want to acknowledge, Nico, your contribution, and also how you have shaped our lives. We appreciate, we love you, and you and Scotty, you are close to our hearts. Colleagues, with these few words, I'm going to give back to Dr. Sipho Maokoto. Dr. Maokoto, you are given the platform to continue the program for the day. A warm welcome, everyone.
Thank you, Professor Reginald, our Dean, for the warm welcome for all the members and all protocol observed this afternoon. Now, without any further ado, I really want to request that colleagues, we want everyone to switch off the cameras if possible so that we save the bandwidth, and also try to mute your microphones. You will only be allowed to unmute when it's time for you as a speaker, and also you can switch on your camera at the same time, but we request that everyone try to help us in saving the bandwidth by switching off the videos or the cameras. Now, without any further ado, I really want to appreciate and say thank you, Professor Reginald, for the warm welcoming. We now feel at home at 171 Dorp Street at the Faculty of Theology. That's our place. That's where we nurture our students, and that's where also our great Professor Nico Koopman has nurtured our students. And now we also want to welcome you, Dean, because you didn't welcome yourself. In isiXhosa, we say wamkelekile, because you didn't welcome yourself, but we welcome you also at this platform. Thank you so much. Now I'll call upon our professor and chair of our Department of Systematic Theology and Ecclesiology, and also the director of our Beyers Naudé Centre for Public Theology, Professor Dion Foster, to introduce our keynote speaker of this day, a very important day for our Professor Nico Koopman. Prof. Dion Foster, over to you.
Nkosi uThixo Maokoto, and let me just add my congratulations to Professor Koopman. Dearest Nico, happy birthday to you. And I can only echo the sentiments of all of the other colleagues, how much we love you and appreciate you, your person, your work. You are a gift to us. Colleagues, the Department of Systematic Theology and Ecclesiology and the Management Committee of the Beyers Naudé Centre is very grateful today to Professor Dirkie Smit, a long-time colleague of ours at the University of the Western Cape and at the University of Stellenbosch, who will be presenting our keynote address today, an engagement and reflection upon the life and the work and the person of Professor Nico Koopman. And Professor Smit, thank you so much for your willingness to do this lecture today. Just before I introduce Professor Smit, just to say we have a full text of the lecture available, which I will send to Professor Koopman so that he has it. And we also have the text available to members who would like to receive it. Just to note that we are hoping to publish the text, so we're not going to post it online at this stage, because obviously it will go through a journal, but we are hoping the editor of the Stellenbosch Theological Journal has already contacted us to say, might they please have the first opportunity. So friends, it gives me great joy to introduce to you Professor Dirk J. Smit from the Princeton Theological Seminary, joining us all the way from the United States. Professor Smit is our lecturer for this afternoon, and he holds the degrees of Master of Arts in Philosophy from the University of Stellenbosch and Doctor of Theology from Stellenbosch University. He has a Doctor of Philosophy honoris causa from Umeå University, Sweden, and a Doctor of Philosophy from the Protestant University Groningen, also honoris causa. His appointments include being an honorary professor of the Humboldt University of Berlin in Germany, an extraordinary professor in the discipline group of systematic theology and ecclesiology at the University of Stellenbosch, South Africa, and also being a fellow of the Institute for Advanced Study in Berlin, the Wissenschaftskolleg zu Berlin, and a member of the Academy of Science of South Africa. As we mentioned, Professor Smit is currently the Ruth and Rimmer de Vries Chair of Reformed Theology and Public Life at Princeton University. Now, colleagues, Professor Smit has very kindly already pre-recorded his lecture. We weren't certain what the ESCOM status would be in terms of our power, and so we pre-recorded the lecture. And so Mrs. Marita Snyman, our program manager in the Beyers Naudé Centre, is now going to share this lecture with you. So let us welcome Professor Smit as he now addresses us.
Invitation was for a lecture engaging both Professor Koopman's person and work. So both his rich professional life, a minister, academic, administrator, public speaker, columnist, as well as his person, his character, and his integrity. Now, in his case, this distinction is not really important. In his institutional and professional life, he is simply true to himself and his own convictions and commitments. And perhaps the best way to honor him may in fact be to try to understand why this is the case. What does his person and work invite us, inspire us, even challenge us to figure out? And the answer is obvious for everyone who knows him. He is committed to a life in verbondenheid. It is difficult to translate. He himself often uses the Afrikaans expression even in English emails. Our challenge is to consider what in verbondenheid could mean, where it originates, what his intentions may be, and where it may lead. For many years now, he has been signing his correspondence with these words. He gave many papers and he published many essays and chapters on togetherness. Most of his columns in Die Burger deal with this theme. And he even practices verbondenheid through daily prayers, shared widely via social media. He is always searching for new words, for new conceptual tools with which to explain verbondenheid, unity, Ubuntu, human dignity, complexity, thinking in and not off, compromise, hybridity, inclusivity, the common good, communion, solidarity, proximity, embrace, reciprocity, interpathy, wholeness, saam wees, saamstap, and whatever else he may find. In fact, he expresses verbondenheid in with more than words. Most of us know how he embodies verbondenheid through compassion, how unselfishly he spends energy and time, how often he is found in hospital rooms and at funerals. And colleagues may be aware how, during conflicts, he reaches out to those of different opinion, inviting them for conversation so that he may hear how they think and feel. Yet still deeper, one may even claim that verbondenheid describes the way he thinks, his habits of the mind. He wrote his master's thesis on suffering, using paradigm theory to argue that there are different discourses about suffering in the biblical and Christian traditions. They are incommensurable. They cannot be reduced to one another or subsumed under one another. They exist together as legitimate ways, all of them speaking truth, but not so that these truths can be integrated into one more comprehensive theory. They can only function together in verbondenheid. He wrote his doctoral dissertation in ethics on the conflict between modern and postmodern approaches, using the renowned ethicists Harry Kuitert and Stanley Hauerwas as representatives of these seemingly mutually exclusive views. And he once again argued that there are elements of truth in all these approaches together, probably to the surprise, if not the shock, of Kuitert and Hauerwas. Again and again, this habit of the mind would show itself. His inaugural lecture argued for more than one way of doing public theology, informed by a rich Trinitarian faith. The original purpose of the Beyers Naudé Centre was to create a space in a deeply divided society where opposing viewpoints could meet, including those who remained excluded from public discourses, so that all could be in one conversation together. When he won the Andrew Murray Prize for Theological Literature with Robert Vosloo, they argued for a variety of ethical approaches, enriching one another in providing moral orientation. He calls his own theology prophetic, but for him this no longer means one way of doing theology distinct from others as normally understood. It rather serves for him as an umbrella term, including all other ways from which prophetic theology has traditionally been distinguished as well. And one could say that he even performs his social roles in this way: pastor, theologian, administrator. It is often hard to say which role he is performing when. And all of this reflects this same habit of the mind, thinking in terms of togetherness, complementarity, mutually enriching verbondenheid. But why? After all, this is not as obvious as one may think. On a day like this, some speculation may probably be allowed on where all this comes from. Perhaps his personality, perhaps his formative childhood, family life and education, perhaps the spirit and the culture of Nikkerk's Hoop and Lime Acres and Kimberley and his beloved Northern Cape. Perhaps the shared experiences of the Tokkies, the University of the Western Cape, during those tumultuous years of an injury to one is an injury to all. However, we are also challenged to ask deeper questions about what is known as the politics of friendship. Can and should friendship, notions of verbondenheid, of belonging and togetherness, can and should this indeed form the basis of public and political life or not? Is it realistic to build life in the polis, the city, on such notions? And even if it is, would it be wise? These are deeply troubling questions. Perhaps we may therefore remind ourselves of 4 dominant discourses in today's politics of friendship, to see potentially different meanings of the expression unverbondenheid, in order then to ask where Koopman belongs. So a first discourse under the heading, the concept of the political. For the first paradigm, political life should never be based on notions of verbondenheid and friendship, because politics rests on the distinction between friend and enemy. Without enemies, without opposition, contestation, conflict, struggle, there can be no politics, many argue. This viewpoint was made influential by the German legal scholar Carl Schmitt. Our concept of the political, for him, depends on the notion of the enemy. With only friends, political life is lost, becomes impossible. And today, Schmitt is still celebrated in both far right and far left circles, and in both notions of democracy and reconciliation and togetherness are often suspect. His argument rests on the distinction between private and public. He is not talking about personal enemies. And Jesus' love your enemies, he says, did not refer to political enemies. But would this then mean that any signature of unverbondenheid will remain restricted to the private sphere only, without public and political consequences? People involved in historical struggles, freedom, class, decolonial, national, cultural, ideological struggles, are often suspicious of talk of unity and reconciliation and verbondenheid, since it may subvert their struggles. For them, conflict and often war define the human condition. Just remember our own struggles over reconciliation. The Cameroonian political theorist Achille Mbembe offers dramatic analysis of our world in this spirit, in his necropolitics, literally the politics of death, originally the politics of enmity. He describes what he calls the end of democracy and the growth of a society of enemies. He paints a somber picture. Ours is a time of fear of others, when people despise all and everything which are not from them and like them, a time of exclusion and new forms of apartheid, of borders and boundaries and walls, a time of brutality and a time without compassion, a time longing for societies without strangers, of movements motivated by hate. Schmidt's world, Mbembe says, has become our world. And for this reason, many, like the leading scholar Tenjiku Maluleke, are skeptical of public theology, because they prefer to underscore the particular struggles which sustain their theologies: Black, liberation, African, feminist. And some argue that the role of power and of violence and of anger should be taken more seriously than discourses of friendship and verbondenheid would seem to allow. So in such a world, the signature in verbondenheid can only mean that we are bound together to struggle as enemies, bound together in conflicts. And many indeed use the notion bound together in this way. They do not always necessarily approve of enmity and conflict, but they acknowledge this as reality. In a book called Bound to Differ, the literary scholar Wesley Court argued that our differences make us who we are. Our disagreements define us. And similarly, the philosopher Kwame Anthony Appiah calls his work on identity politics the lies that bind, rethinking identity. And then he discusses creed, country, color, class, and culture as the lies that bind us, always bind us to some others, simultaneously dividing us from others. The political theorist Francis Fukuyama, in Identity, the Demand for Dignity and the Politics of Resentment, warns against the rise in identity politics today, since, he says, we will doom ourselves to continuing conflict. And the philosopher Martin Nussbaum argues that the cosmopolitan tradition, this tradition of togetherness in one world, that this is a noble but flawed ideal. And many more voices could be added, but the approach is clear. According to many, it is naive and misleadingly optimistic to build politics on friendship and verbondenheid. The reality is rather that we are bound by power relations and injustice and violence and struggle. Which brings us to a second of the four discourses under the heading Another Self. There is also a second paradigm, ancient and widespread, namely the tradition that politics is indeed based on friendship. The classic authority has always been the Greek philosopher Aristotle, who argued for friendship as the central foundation of ethics and politics. Yet again, This tradition has had many influential representatives. This politics of friendship is often seen as the classic tradition of Western political philosophy. For Aristotle, a friend is just another self. He distinguishes three forms of friendship, one based on utility, on the usefulness of others, ways in which they provide what we need. One based on the pleasure others give us, the joys we share, the ways they attract and please and delight us. And the third one based on our common character and values of truth and justice and goodness. For him, all three these forms of friendship together contribute to social and civic life. They all are forms of political friendship. And as many have pointed out over the centuries, they are all forms of self-love. We love our friends because we recognize something of ourselves in them, something that we need, that we enjoy, that we value. We actually love ourselves in and through them. And with that, the roots of many temptations are obvious. This form of verbondenheid easily only includes those who are like us and whom we like, from racisms to nationalisms to patriarchies to crude favoritism, nepotism, corruption. We all know its faces. This tradition took on many forms. Even John Calvin said that God gave something in others, even those most different and furthest removed, something that we can recognize and respect, namely both God's own image, which we all share, and our own flesh. This tradition of another self contributed much to today's so-called universal values of human dignity and rights, democratic culture, liberal and humanist worldviews. And this is the tradition heard in Koopman's inaugural lecture when he says, I quote, it's a long quote, when he says, when Nelson Mandela was released, we faced the challenge to move from the old South Africa of diverse and apart to the new South Africa of diverse and together. From the old of enmity to the new of friendship. From the old of injustice to the new of justice for all. From the old of dehumanization to the new of dignity. From the old of racism to the new of non-racialism. From the old of classism to the new of equity and equilibrium. From the old of sexism to the new of gender justice and partnership. From the old of homophobia to the new of embracement of the other. From the old of ageism, handicapism, and xenophobia to the new of hospitality to all age groups, to abled and differently abled people, and to other nationalities. From the old of ecocide to the new of communion and solidarity between the human and non-human parts of creation. End of the quote. Many of us will recognize this as vintage Koopman. This is how he talks, this is how he writes, politically sensitive and correct, and eager to include every new way in which verbondenheid and togetherness can replace apartheid and exclusion. And this clearly speaks the language of this second tradition of a politics of friendship. However, these are not the only paradigms, and perhaps not the one that he truly prefers, which brings us to a third discourse under the heading, There's Something. During the first centuries, Christians never really followed Aristotle and antiquity in this appreciation of friendship. Although the term friend also plays an intriguing role in biblical traditions, Christians disliked and distrusted the problems connected to a politics of friendship and preferred the terms neighbor instead of friend and love instead of friendship. And for them, love meant something more, much more inclusive and radical. They were not concerned with being friends, recognizing themselves in others, but with the love revealed in the one who gave God's self for others while they were still enemies. In history, thinkers would therefore often contrast the classical tradition of friendship with the Christian tradition of love. Until the 19th century, Friedrich Nietzsche would break with both traditions, describing the Christian way as a sick slave morality, and replaced both with the will to power. For Christians, this new verbondenheid, founded in God's love, of course raised the difficult question of inclusion and exclusion, often a real stumbling block and a scandal. Few expressed these convictions more movingly than the Afrikaans poet Adam Small. In his first volume of poetry, the 1962 Gitaar My Kruis, he has a poem called There's Something. He addresses someone as you, obviously apartheid personified, and acknowledges how many things, normal, everyday human things, this you can prevent him from doing. These many silly things that he can be denied evidently serve as a description of the oppressive effects of the racist apartheid ideology and laws. So repeatedly, however, a refrain claims, but oh, there's something you can never do. You can even stop me trying getting to heaven from a grote kerk pew, but there's something you can never do, which is then revealed in the last lines, namely, you can't ever stop me loving even you. Now, this was already the political tradition of the North African thinker from the 4th century, Augustine, who prayed to God in his influential Confessions, blessed are those who love you and love their friends in you and their enemies for your sake. Loving friends in God and loving enemies for God's sake, this clearly had radically different social and political implications. Koopman's appreciation for small is well documented. And the title of Koopman's inaugural lecture unmistakably reflects the spirit of Augustine. For God so loved the world, some contours for public theology in South Africa. In the New Testament, this spirit is, of course, abundantly clear. For example, in the Good Samaritan, it opens with the question of our first two paradigms. Who may I exclude from any verbondenheid and regard as enemy? And who is my neighbor? Replying to that, Jesus uses the Samaritan as example, the classic figure of the political enemy, the furthest apart and the most other imaginable. Go and do likewise, Jesus says, after the account of an attack on a dangerous road. Do not ask who my neighbor is, but go and become a neighbor precisely to those publicly regarded as your enemies. Signing emails in this spirit of this paradigm within verbondenheid would thus say nothing about the person addressed and not even something about an already existing relationship, but primarily something about the one who is signing. It says, I feel bound to you and I am committed to you for God's sake, irrespective of how you may feel about me and of any histories between us. Now, this way of thinking obviously raises new questions, also for public life. Alan Boesak is well known for his moving expositions of this parable. And the final question, he says, is what the Good Samaritan was supposed to do if he appeared on the scene while the attack was still taking place. Since this is, after all, where we find ourselves in the struggles of life. Which brings us to a fourth and final discourse. It is possible to distinguish a fourth discourse, namely the critical, skeptical, even cynical thought of figures like Nietzsche and Derrida. Derrida's study, called Politics of Friendship, appeals to a long tradition who all preferred another quote attributed to Aristotle, not another self and the discussion of friendship. Although no one knows whether Aristotle actually ever said this, these words, which Aristotle perhaps, but perhaps not, used are literally, "Oh friends, no friend." It is in the literary form of an apostrophe, so addressed to someone, called friends in the plural, "Oh friends," but we do not know to whom or what it means. And this allows Derrida, typical for him, to suggest different contexts for these words, each time also translated differently, with different meanings. And in 10 dense chapters of his book, he plays this same game 10 times, each time beginning with these words, but yet each time imagining a different context and therefore a different meaning and therefore different possible implications. Now it is, although it is impossible to say what Derrida means, one is not even supposed to try, there is a theme running through his Politics of Friendship, namely the theme of perhaps, the future, the not yet. Oh, my friends, there is no true friend. That whenever we say friends, we know we are covering up much darkness. We know there is no real verbondenheid, no real solidarity, no real democracy. Yet perhaps every time we testify there is no friend, do our words not sound like sighs, like a longing that one day in future, perhaps? After all, why do we say this? Why do we sigh like this to one another? Because we secretly long that things were different and that there were real friends. And by longing together like this, do we perhaps somehow make promises to one another? Do we with our sighs together wonder whether things may be perhaps become different after all? This possibility of the impossibility should remain, says Derrida. This remote possibility of real friendship, real belonging, real recognition, of saamwees, of verbondenheid. This is decisive for our future. Sighing like this, signing our name like this, is a risk, he says, full of uncertainty, filled with the inassurance of the perhaps. Yet it is living with an open heart. Friendship with an open heart is living as if things may become different after all. Perhaps. Derrida concludes his book with some honest, self-critical questions. In his own special way, he says, he also believes, and he therefore keeps wondering whether it is perhaps possible to implement democracy, the real democracy. Could we still use these old words like togetherness and democracy and verbondenheid, but save them from the dark meanings they have acquired for so long, and imagining something new? The final line of his book therefore reads, "Oh, my democratic friends." And this does not sound like the signature in verbondenheid. So where do we find Nico Koopman in this typology? What does his signature in verbondenheid share? Remembering his habits of the heart, we could expect to find him agreeing with elements of truth in all four approaches, that all four are dangerous and therefore contested. And whoever signed them should not expect that all others will agree. Many will be suspicious and critical. There is no way in which Koopman would support the politics of enmity of Smit. In fact, his passion has always been to oppose such forms of seeing others as enemies. But hopefully he is realistic enough to see the seriousness, to see the kind of world that Mbembe describes, and to realize that for the moment we may indeed only be bound to many others by the lies that we are continuously made to believe. We about them, they about us. There can also be no doubt that he is deeply committed to the second paradigm, the tradition of Aristotle and of humanist and democratic values and institutions and practices. Dignity, equality, justice, well-being, flourishing, these are all Koopman words. And when he signs within verbondenheid, this probably also implies that the addressee is somehow just another self, trusting that they do share something, whether needs or joys or values, and that somewhere deep they do belong together, in spite of outward appearances and inner feelings. However, he also sincerely believes in the third way of the Christian tradition. And here he may perhaps be most at home. And his Verbondenheid probably says more about himself than about his addressees. He is probably saying, I am committed to you, irrespective of how you may feel about me. Our friendship does not depend on something in you and in you being a friend to me, but on something in me and on me intending to be a friend to you, no matter what. And again, this spirit will also meet with resistance and rejection. But what about the fourth one? We should hopefully also hear this in Koopman's words. Again, some may doubt this perhaps. Some may doubt this and may find him too positive and approving, not prophetic enough in the traditional sense, not skeptical and critical enough, often showing too much gratitude and approval and too little struggle. But this may be a grave misreading of his signature. Read carefully. He is not merely endorsing and defending existing realities, whether the church, the university, democracy, the constitution, although it sometimes almost seems to be the case. Read carefully, he rather seems committed to what these institutions could be, but not yet are. He seems committed to the perhaps of a politics of friendship, to what could perhaps become real if we would imagine this together. And his Verbondenheid probably means, I trust that you also dream this dream of what is not yet real. Oh, friends, I know there is no friend. There is no real democracy yet. There is no real justice yet. There is no real inclusion and hospitality yet. There is no true well-being and transformation yet. But hopefully you also still share this dream. The best indication that this may actually be his intention may lie in the role that prayer plays in his thought. And this is indeed remarkable. Here today we celebrate a public intellectual and a vice rector who openly speaks about prayer and worship and who practices a daily ministry of public prayer. Why? Perhaps his small book, Reflections on the Lord's Prayer, called Cries for a Humane Life, provides some answer. He introduces the Lord's Prayer there as a cry to belong. And then he discusses the petitions, all from this remarkable perspective. So in his own way, Koopman's logic reminds us today of the logic of another friend who also lived as if not, and also imagined a different future. The Lord's Prayer for Koopman serves as a cry for political friendship not yet fulfilled, but perhaps. So, what does his person and work invite us to think about on his 60th birthday? Perhaps his answer would be that we should think about prayer. Prayer as expression of human longing for belonging, for life and verbondenheid. Prayer as thinking our way into God's world. Prayer as politics of friendship. Congratulations.
Thank you so much to Professor Smit for this really beautiful lecture. I think let's all use the opportunity to clap hands. If you check there on your facial expressions, you can use the item to clap hands. This was a really beautiful lecture that describes who Nico is and our colleague, and for verbondenheid. We are really in that verbondenheid. We are in this verbondenheid. Prof. Nico Koopman. Prof, thank you so much for this beautiful lecture and the reflection on his public theological reflections. I always, when I was talking to Prof. Nico Koopman the other day, just some couple of years before the retirement of Prof. Dirkie Smit, while he was still around, I said, you know, Prof. Dirkie Smit is our own Karl Barth at the Faculty of Theology at Stellenbosch. So thank you so much, Prof. We really deeply appreciated and also touched by this lecture this afternoon. Now, without any further ado, colleagues, we will give our colleagues who are around, we will really take only 5 minutes for the speakers that I will call upon for the reflection on Prof. Nico Koopman. So those reflections, I will only give you 5 minutes, colleagues. You unmute and also use your video so that you pass the message to Professor Nico Koopman on his 60th birthday. We really celebrate together in this verbondenheid. So the first speaker for this afternoon, I will call upon our Deputy Vice Chancellor, Strategy and Internationalization at Stellenbosch University, Prof. Hester Klopper, to really unmute your microphone. We welcome you, Prof, to say a few words to Professor Nico Koopman on his birthday, 60th birthday. If Prof, you are here, then I will call upon you to make your reflections on this day to Prof. Nico Koopman. Colleagues, you can help me if Prof is here. Professor Hester Klopper.
Hi, this is Professor Wim de Villiers here. I have to apologize for Professor Klopper. She had a recent tragedy in the family that she is seeing to. So let me jump in here, and as Rector and Vice Chancellor of Stellenbosch University, take this opportunity of congratulating Prof. Koopman on his 60th birthday. And what a wonderful lecture by Professor Dirkie Smit that speaks to Nico's commitment to unverbondenheid. So, Nico, this is an opportunity to reflect, but also to look forward on your career, your contribution, and still many things to come. So I got to know Nico when I started out as Vice Chancellor and Rector here in April 2015, and I've really come to know him subsequently as both as a colleague, but more than that, as a friend, and as someone who is thoughtful, he's caring, he's deeply compassionate, and he is a public theologian, but he is a wonderful human being, and I'm really it's an honor to count him as one of my friends. So when I first met him, he was Dean of Theology at that time, and I was a new Rector and Vice Chancellor. And he must have, we had some sessions, and I was young and still wanted to, do lots of things. And he must have recoiled in horror at some of the heretical ideas I had about the role that a faculty of theology should or shouldn't play. But he was very gentle with me, and he then subsequently became Deputy Vice Chancellor for Social Impact, Transformation and Personnel, and is now in his second term in that role. And as I've come to learn, is that theologians speak in threes. So as such, I think his responsibility center and his portfolio includes that, it testifies to that. So it's social impact first, and there it's really his commitment to the community outside of the university, how the university has an impact on the community and the community influences the university, and how that plays out in his portfolio. Secondly, deep commitment to transformation. And from what I think that he's been very successful in bringing in transformation as a relatively on the periphery of the university, that's really integrated it and hardwired it into the core of the university. And that speaks to that as well. And then thirdly, is responsibility in terms of personnel and staff, both support and academic, where we have, as one of the university's strategic themes, is that we strive to be an employer of choice. And everything that Nico does is to really contribute to this. There's a deep commitment to well-being and wellness of staff in all of their spheres. So all of this speaks significantly to unverbodenheid, and I love that theme of what Dirkie said. So lastly, what I want to say is that Nico and I personally, we share a deep love for cricket, both as a game and also as a metaphor for life. And Nico, you are now 60 not out. 60 not out. So let's think a little bit about that. There may have been some streaky shots through the slips. There may even have been a dropped catch along the way, but some glorious cover drives for fours and a few stunning sixes. But this is still an incomplete innings. It's still not out. So the best is still to come. And I just want to wish you all the best for the rest of a very long innings towards a fantastic century. So I really wish you all the best on the behalf of the rectorate and the university. And as you like to say when you end off some of your talks, and that's the news from the Wanderers. So thank you very much, Nico.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Prof. That was our own Ingununu, the Rector and Vice Chancellor of our University of Stellenbosch. Thank you so much, Prof. Vem de Villiers, for your words to Prof. Nico Koopman. Thank you so much. We really appreciate that, Prof. Thank you so much. Now, without any further ado, I will call our own colleague, Prof. Rudolf von Sina. He is a professor of systematic theology, ecumenism, and interreligious dialogue at the Escola Superior de Teologia, Lutheran School of Theology at Sao Leopoldo, Rio Grande do Sul, Brazil, and he is the chairperson of our global network of public theology. Over to you, and welcome, Prof. von Sina. Over to you, my professor, colleague.
Thank you very much, Sipho, Dr. Mahokoto. A good morning to all of you from Brazil, a good afternoon in South Africa, and other hours wherever you might be. Dear Professor Wim de Villiers, Vice Chancellor and Rector of Stellenbosch University, dear Professor Reggie Nell, Dean of the Faculty of Theology, in whose names I greet all the authorities and institutions today present, esteemed colleagues from the Academy, Church and Society, dearest Scatti and other family members, and of course, and foremost today, dear Professor Nico Koopman, Vice Rector, Social Impact, Transformation and Personnel of Stellenbosch University, colleague, broer, masseken, friend and collaboration partner for 14 years now on this auspicious day. There's energy here. This is a phrase I've heard many times from you, Nico, and cited numerous times in various contexts because it is so fitting. Not only because of the words as such and the meaning they carry, but the unmistakable way you pronounce them, and even more importantly, you live them. Be it as a university teacher, a student counselor, a church minister, an administrator, a leader, a husband and father, a transformer. You, as an apparently soft-spoken and certainly most kind man, suddenly transform into a fervent preacher and reveal a package of incredible energy whenever there is a message of hope and encouragement, but also of prophetic challenge and the defense of justice to be delivered. While I know you have gone through some challenging moments of counterwinds, I have never seen this energy dwindle. And you don't keep it for yourself, dear Nico, much less use it for your own personal benefit, but share it widely with those around you and kindle the flame of their own sometimes low energy to gain new momentum. This has a tremendous impact on all, from the cleaning lady to the rector of the university, all treated by you with the greatest dignity they indeed deserve. As I bring to you and this gathering the greetings of the global network of public theology, and celebrate with you 6 decades of a blessed, even if not rarely tough life and ministry, and wish you many more blessed years to come, I cannot but imagine that this energy will not stop, but continue to flow and give you and many others strength, hope, and passion. And as Professor Smit so well said it, it creates Verbundenheit. Among the many fruits of such energy are indeed the leadership you have given as one of the founders, promoters, and chair of the Global Network of Public Theology. And many former, current, and I hope future members of this network are here today. I stand here today as one of your successors, having the privilege to chair and host the 6th consultation in October next year at Curitiba, Brazil, under the theme Public Theologies in Vibrating Cities, Precious and Precarious. It all started for me with a coincidence, or should we say providence, that I could be present at the pre-foundation meeting of the network in Edinburgh 2005, and then as a member in residence of the Centre for Theological Inquiry at Princeton in 2007, when the founding meeting was held. You, Nico, were there, and again, much energy was there. Theologically speaking, a moment of kairos and the presence of the Holy Spirit, and continued with the network throughout the following years as intense interaction with the concept, content, and consequences of the use of public theology. Through profound and creative elaboration and sometimes fierce but necessary critique, it was forged not to present a globalizing, universal, and unique concept, but to locally aggregate energy as we reflect upon and put into practice the gospel in critical analysis and constructive proposal we present to academies, churches, and societies as a contribution towards justice and peace. You, Nico, have given numerous contributions for South Africa and beyond, so that today we can say that if there is one person in the network that cannot not be quoted, it is Nico Koopman. The network also created a journal, the International Journal of Public Theology, and to create and maintain a journal, you know it well, even more so a new one, is an enormous challenge. With Nico Koopman on the editorial board right from the beginning until he withdrew due to his ever-increasing responsibilities at Stellenbosch University, the journal can this year celebrate its 15th year of existence. Nico contributed, if I see well, with 5 articles and an editorial. The latest one is from early 2019, where Nico summarizes his own contribution as follows. The central aim of public theology that I sought to practice was to advance a life of inalienable dignity, holistic healing, responsible freedom, reconciling justice and equality through equity. End of quote. Seeking to interrelate the public contents, the public rationality, and the public meaning and implications of faith Nico anchors public theology in a Trinitarian anthropology of vulnerability, as well as in the threefold office of Christ as prophet, priest, and royal servant. The prophetic part Nico defines as fivefold: envisioning, criticizing, recovering storytelling, being technical in terms of social, political, cultural, and so on analysis, and as policy making. In that article, Nico refers extensively to the late Brazilian theologian, educator, and psychanalyst Rubem Alves, who suffered very directly the effects of Protestantism and repression. One of Alves' books' title, as he was made a persona non grata both by the military regime of the 1960s and 1970s in Brazil and by his own Presbyterian church. In fact, he became a much more public thinker and activist once he was freed from the restraints of a church closed in itself and hostile to transformation, freedom, and ecumenism. From Alves, Nico takes inspiration as to maintain hope, imagination, and creativity against all pessimism and accommodation, because, and I quote, imagination is more real and reality less real than it looks. It is the hunch that the overwhelming brutality of facts that oppress and repress is not the last word, end of quote. Nico, in turn, has become a very important inspiration and reference for public theology in Brazil, which is much more inspired by South African ventures into public theology than by its North American or European versions. And this enabled us to have, thanks to Nico and to our dear friend Clint Lebrains, who so sadly left us all too early in January, a very fruitful South-South dialogue within the global network of public theology, which continues to be nurtured by the Beyers Naudé Centre for Public Theology at Stellenbosch University, created by Nico Koopman and today led by its current director, Professor Dion Forster. I therefore end with a very heartfelt expression of gratitude to Professor Nico Koopman for all these most relevant contributions and all the energy he has given to the global network of public theology, and congratulate him in the name of the global network on his 60th birthday. I also congratulate your wife, Scatty, your children and grandchildren, the Uniting Reformed Church, Stellenbosch University, the Faculty of Theology, and the Beyers Naudé Centre of Public Theology for having someone like Nico in your midst. As my dear friend and colleague Dion Forster would say, Nico, you are a gift. Baie dankie, muito obrigado, and congratulations.
Wow, obrigado, Prof. Onsina. I like your Afrikaans is good, and for bondenheid and baie dankie for toespraak. So without any further ado, thank you so much, Prof. Onsina. It's really beautiful messages that are coming towards your side, Prof. Nico Koopman, from your own colleagues, people who are continuing to work with you. We will now call upon Dr. Setri Nyomi. He's a senior lecturer at the Trinity Theological Seminary, Legon, and district pastor at EP Church, Adenta in Ghana. He is also the former secretary of the World Alliance of Reformed Churches, which is now known as the World Communion of Reformed Churches, and also an ecumenical representative. Dr. Setri Nyomi, over to you to really say a few words to Prof. Nico Koopman.
Happy birthday, Professor Nico Koopman. Nico, as you celebrate this significant day, we rejoice with you and your family. You have been such a refreshing gift to those of us who have come to know you as a friend. At a time when the world is filled with values for private religion that tends to serve their own selfish interests and to glorify greed and self-centeredness, you have been a prophetic theologian whose quiet but steady words and actions have been a strong force in public theological discourse. You have been consistent with this over the last couple of decades that I have come to know you. In recent weeks, some of us have enjoyed the bonus of having your daily devotional posts in social media. And these have been inspirational and have urged us on in the ministries to which God has called us. Nico, you understand God's mission to include our calling to be God's agents for transformation. We live in a broken world where powerful forces have banded together to foster economic systems in which just a few benefits at the expense of the many, and which is characterized by excluding so many people all over the world. Even the church has been fooled into going along with this design, even though we know the Lord of the church has clearly indicated that what we do for those in the margins, the least of these, are things that we do for him. It is in such a world that you have refused to be co-opted to work with the powers that foster this false religion. Nico, you have been a man of faith and courage, a scholar whose life has impacted so many. We thank God for you and for your commitment to being God's instrument in transforming our communities and in turning this world into a more just world. As you celebrate your 60th birthday, may God bless you. May you and your family experience God's love, which you have radiated so effectively to others. My wife, Akpene, joins me in wishing you a very happy birthday. May this day begin many more fulfilling decades. Happy birthday.
Wow. Thank you so much to Dr. Seth Nyomi. And we know him very well. He visited our faculty, and also he was the main preacher at our former rector and vice chancellor, Prof. Russell Boatman's funeral. Thank you so much, Dr. Seth Nyomi, for your contribution and kind words to Prof. Nico Koopman. Now we'll call upon our own professor, who is a former dean of our Faculty of Theology and only the chapel master at the Andrew Murray Centre for Spirituality in Wellington, Professor Elna Moton. Welcome, Prof, and the platform is yours.
Dear Nico, family, friends, and colleagues, it is an honor and delight to reflect on your life and career as a friend and former colleague, and especially as my successor as Dean of the Faculty of Theology in Stellenbosch in April 2010. It is with a sincere sense of gratitude and wonder that I participate in this program. For many years, we had the privilege of working together in various positions. In the first place, I want to thank God from my heart for empowering and equipping you to take on increasing responsibilities and challenges in your career. With focus and inner calm, you have led the way during times of transition in our country, in the church, as well as in higher education. I pay tribute to you today as a friend in times of celebration and loss, for your respect and compassion, your contagious sense of humor, and your professional integrity. Three rather unique characteristics immediately come to mind. your endearing way of giving your colleagues nicknames, your colorful vocabulary as far as adjectives are concerned, and thirdly, you, Nico, embody the rich yet complex notion of hybridity in all that is associated with threshold experiences. I was very intrigued by your insight into liminal situations during 2011 and 2012, when we worked as co-authors with colleagues from various African countries on a book, Living with Dignity, African Perspectives on Gender Equality, published in 2015 by Sun Media. It was later awarded the Andrew Murray Desmond Tutu Prize. I remember your passion and commitment to the process and its many challenges. You wrote an introductory chapter to the volume, inter alia, with reference to the work of ecumenical bodies such as the World Communion of Reformed Churches and the World Council of Churches. Nico, you have given the continent of Africa a great legacy in this book, in addition to your other research and many public presentations. These are highlighted by your personal ethos and passion for a pedagogy of reconciliation and justice in the church, public theology, and higher education. We honor you for your critical constructive engagement in many conferences and discourses on human dignity in the context of globalization. I have lit a candle for you and your dear ones here in the chapel of the Andrew Murray Centre for Spirituality in Wellington. I also pray for continued wisdom and good health for you as Vice Rector. I conclude by quoting you, in verbondenheid, Elna.
Thank you so much, Prof. Moton, our former Dean at the Faculty of Theology, and we continue to see you at the Andrew Murray Centre. Thank you so much for your words to Prof. Nico Koopman. Now I will call upon our own colleague, Dr. Nadia Murray, who is a lecturer at our department, Systematic Theology and Ecclesiology, teaching Systematic Theology. She is a former student of our colleague, Prof. Nico Koopman. Dr. Nadia Murray, if you are here, colleague, switch on your mic and your video and say some few words to Prof. Nico Koopman. Welcome.
Thank you, Sipho, and it's great to join you also in this way. So I think you can tell a lot about a person based on how they say hello. We have all come to know Professor Koopman as a joyful, kind, and a warm person. He makes every person he greets feel really important, and when I was his student, this was no less the case. But I think you can tell even more about a person based on how they say goodbye. And as we are all realizing with the move to online work, it is so easy to be misread and misunderstood over email or electronic correspondence, which makes it all the more important what we communicate at the beginning, and I think even more so at the end of our contact with another person. So I'm fascinated by how people wrap up a conversation. So consider, for instance, the ever popular greeting, kind regards, at the end of a letter or an email. No one can take issue with regards that are kind, right? So since it is neither too cold a greeting nor too familiar, it strikes a safe balance between being professional and being at ease. And conveniently, the kind can also be swapped out. For instance, you can substitute kind for warm. Warm regards are a little bit more friendly, the kind of regards that you want to receive from colleagues that you respect but also like as people. The kind of regards that communicate that I regard you, no pun intended, not only as a colleague, but also as a friend. Now, the great thing about saying farewell with regards language is that it lies on a spectrum. You can increase your friendliness, or you can retreat into a little colder, more formal stance. And you cannot really offend anyone in the process. The worst, coldest version of regards is simply regards. It is the leaving out of any kind of adjective and opting for the ultra-polite, extremely boring, but very safe regards. Now, I don't know about you, but I usually reserve these gems for situations wherein I am either really tired and I really just want to be done with the matter, or where I have zero time to consider how I'd like to come across to the person receiving my email, and I just hit send to get the job done. But Professor Nico Koopman does not use regards language. We could say, I think, that he levels up. And I say this because if you are like me and you also opt for regards language, you might also have thought to yourself, as I have, that his choice of words are far more befitting of a theologian. Now, I speak, of course, of his signature greeting and verbondenheid that quite a number of people have already referred to. Now, as Professor Dirkie Smit also said, it's a really difficult Afrikaans word to translate into English. But to my mind, it is really difficult to miss, I think, a key or theological word at the heart of this greeting, namely the word verbond, covenant. This greeting always reminds me of Peter Lilback's book on Calvin, on specifically Calvin's role in the development of covenant theology. Just the title, The Binding of God. I don't want to talk about this book, but I do want to invoke this image, this rhetoric. The language of binding, of bonds, of being bonded to another, reveals not only a different choice of rhetoric, but also the intentional choice for warmer, closer, deeper relationships than what the somewhat sterile clinical language of regards invokes. When Professor Koopman greets with these words and verbondenheid, I'm always reminded of the fact that we are one another's keepers. We belong not to ourselves, but to God and to one another. But this, I think, is not only a theological rhetoric, it is also a deeply humanizing rhetoric. And I think this is exactly what Professor Koopman's farewell words do and intend to do. They humanize the interaction. In this time, within the university as well as within our churches, I wonder whether we can afford to underestimate the importance of our rhetoric, our grammar, our language, including our everyday words, our dears and our regards. When I think of Professor Koopman, I do think of him as my lecturer and as a mentor, as a person that I look up to and have always felt safe with, as someone worth listening to, even in the most difficult conversations and circumstances, as someone that I trust, as someone that I follow and would follow. But I also think of Professor Koopman's humanizing words and his skill with language. With these two words, just two words, he conveys what I think is the theological heart of an entire tradition. And each time I read these words, I'm reminded, even when I'm really not a great fan of humankind in that very moment, that I too am human, and that this means that I belong to you and you to me. The ties that bind us all to one another are worth honoring, even in our everyday greetings, in each and every farewell. You remind me of this every time you say or write in verbondenheid, Professor. So, Prof, thank you for your kindness, for your humility, for your humaneness, for your humor. I can't speak on behalf of all your students, but as one of your students, one of your former students, I'd just like to say it is good to know you. Thank you for your friendship, for your humanity, for your verbondenheid. Happy birthday, Professor Koopman, or should I say 60 and not out. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mare, for your words. You just spoke for all of us because we are also students that were nurtured and also supervised by Professor Nico Koopman. Thank you so much for those words. We really appreciate that. Now, I will call upon our next speaker, Reverend Walter Philander. of the Uniting Reformed Church in Southern Africa. Reverend Philander is the chairperson of our Cape Synod Ministerial Formation Task Team, which used to be known as the Curatorium of URSA. Reverend Philander, over to you, colleague.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Welcome.
I was just thinking the whole time of what do you say after Professor Dirkie Smit? It was a really inspiring lecture. Nico and Scotty, we cannot just congratulate Professor Nico Koopman, but also you have to include Scotty. On behalf of the curatorium of the Uniting Reformed Church in Cape Synod, I feel honored to say a few words of congratulations on becoming 60 years young. Firstly, welcome to the 60s Club, Nico. It is a special breed of people who has stood the test of time and experience the old and the new. The old dark years of apartheid and the dawn of democracy within our South African history. If my memory serves me right, I know you for 33 years since I started my theological studies at the University of Western Cape, where you became the student chaplain. And it was under your leadership and guidance that we have learned leading with humility. Your humility is contagious and speaks volumes of a servanthood leader. And Verbondenheid became a reconciling trademark of the Nico Koopman era. It is a greed that impacted on many of our lives because it says something of the reconciling spirit you not only proclaimed, but also embodied and still embody, always considering the other. Yes, you are a great scholar and theologian, but you have also succeeded in bringing the academia and pastoral care closer to one another. I have experienced you as someone with a pastoral heart who forever is available to listen to the challenges of others. You treat everyone with Ubuntu, no matter the color or culture, tradition, language, political persuasion. To many a student, you were and still is a mentor, a teacher, a confidant, and a father figure. Someone they can trust and also respect. As a curatorium and all its members, we wish you well, Nico. We wish you great health and God's richest blessing. We pray shalom into and upon your life. And Verbondenheid. I thank you.
And Verbondenheid. Thank you so much, Reverend Philander, for your words. And yeah, what a day, beautiful day. Now I will really call upon our next speaker, Professor Heinrich Bedford-Stroom. He's a bishop of the Lutheran Church and the chair of the Council of the Evangelical Church in Germany, but he's also an international public theologian. Prof, thank you so much, and you're welcome. The podium is yours.
Thanks, Sifo. Dear Nico and dear Scotty, and I say dear brothers and sisters, it is just wonderful to be able to be part of this beautiful celebration. I have often give talks about the chances and risks of digital technology, also at Stellenbosch faculty. Today, I really celebrate this possibility to personally witness this celebration of Nico Koopman's life from downtown Berlin, even though I'm so far away. and also to hear this brilliant lecture of Dirkie Smit that has hit the soul of Nico's life so well. Let me begin very personally. Nico is not only my friend, he is also my brother. That is how it feels. When I first met him at the founding meeting of the Global Network for Public Theology, already mentioned, in Princeton 27, there was an immediate feeling of kinship of soul in myself. It felt and it still feels like an experience of the grace of God. That two people with such different backgrounds from different continents, with different languages, would find each other in this way. It was then later a great honor and joy for me to serve as extraordinary professor at Stellenbosch Faculty of Theology under his leadership. And it meant very much to me that at my installation as the Lutheran Bishop of Bavaria on October 30th in the year 2011 in Nuremberg, he came all the way from South Africa to be one of my assistants and to give me his blessings for my office. We have seen each other since then, not so often, maybe once a year in Stellenbosch, in Berlin and other places. But every time again, there's this feeling of deep connectedness. When I think of Nico, I think of the basic ingredients of a Christian life: faith, hope, and love. Faith, yes, he is a very spiritual person. His daily WhatsApp morning prayers that were already mentioned reach many people everywhere in the world, certainly in Munich, Germany. They are the expression of a deep faith strengthened by profound theological reflection. Hope. Nico, for me, radiates what Dietrich Bonhoeffer called the will to future. It is no cheap optimism, no ignorance of the deep sorrows and sufferings of the world, but it is a deep trust that God is there and at work, and that in the end all tears will be wiped away. And it is a trust which does not pacify protest, but enables to act. It is true, says Bonhoeffer, that there is a silly, cowardly kind of optimism, which we must condemn. But the optimism that is will for the future should never be despised, even if it is proved wrong 100 times. It may be that the day of judgment will dawn tomorrow. In that case, we will gladly stop working for a better future, but not before. And maybe that is the perhaps of Derrida, just maybe with a little more trust. Dear Nico, this is what you radiate with all your existence. This is why I say the world really needs you. And now love, which is the greatest of the three. Do I have to make many more words? I don't think so. It was said already. Just look at him. And you see so much love. It is a tough job to be vice president of the University of Stellenbosch these days. There are so many open wounds after the terrible injustices of the past. There is so much injustice still to be overcome. There is so much anger to be dealt with. Why has Nico Koopman been so successful in his job, with the consequence of being re-elected for a second period? maybe it is completely audacious to give an answer from so far away, from outside, but I dare to say it is love. It is this feeling in people's hearts, no matter what side they are on, that there is a man at work who radiates love in situations where mistrust and sometimes even hate begins to spread. That there is a man who lives what Martin Luther King Jr. once put in words. Hate can never be overcome by hate. Hate can only be overcome by love. I thank God for all the blessings which God has given into Nico's life. And I thank God for all the blessings which have come out of 60 years of this life for so many people, including myself. I praise the Lord for my brother Nico, and I look forward to many hours together with him, with the Lord in our midst. Congratulations to your 60th birthday, Nico.
Thank you so much, Prof. Bedford-Strom, for your kind words and very touching words as well, indeed. So, colleagues, now we'll call upon Dr. Nico Koopman of the Ecumenical Foundation of Southern Africa at Stellenbosch, who's also the colleague of Prof. Nico Koopman. Professor Nico Koopman is the chairperson of the EFSA Institute, where Dr. Renier is the director of the EFSA Institute at Stellenbosch. Doc, good afternoon. Your podium is yours.
Good afternoon, Sipu. Good afternoon, Nico. It's absolutely incredible to see so many common friends today sharing their gratefulness for working with you. From my side, I could just say it's an incredible privilege working with you, and you took over from Russell Botman when he passed away and has served on our board as Dean of the Faculty, and since 6 years ago as Chairperson of EFSA. It's an incredible lecture and sharing of many people of what inverbondenheid means for you. I can only say that deeply I've had the privilege to get to know you as a person of faith, and that inverbondenheid for me personally means in the first place that in all our many meetings, small meetings, many of them in Koopman's huis, not belonging to you, but the place where we often meet as a kind of a think tank that do a lot of the planning about the challenges we face, the fault lines in society, the tensions in all the relationships we have to manage, the different spheres of life. Nico, what is outstanding for me is that you're deeply, deeply a committed Christian, and that there's no disparity between your personal faith and your public life or public theology. For that, I say thank you, and thank you for being willing to cement the partnership of more than 30 years with the Faculty of Theology, with the Beyers Naudé Institute. We have a lot of challenges that is unfinished, but you create this space of trust for us that gives us the energy to keep on working. Thank you very much. I look forward to the time we have to share for the future, and all the blessings from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doc. Thank you so much. Colleagues, now we are almost done with our program. We have few speakers left. Now I will call upon our own colleague, Professor Rodney Chaka, who is a professor in systematic theology at UNISA and former colleague at the Beyers Naudé Centre. Welkom.
I've cut my video because if I put it on, I seem to be running into trouble. So
Okay.
I'm just going to wait without that.
That's great.
Let me just start off by also thanking you and the many people who were involved in setting up this day, all protocol observed. I must say it is a very rare thing that many people come to an occasion like this and say almost the same thing about this person. And so there is nothing for me to add because I agree 100% with all that has been said about the person of Nico and also the way that he engages with everyone, from the cleaner, as someone also observed, to rectors and fellow members of senior management where he finds himself. And so if we agree that the person of the stature of Nico is a true human being, I think we also need to agree that perhaps there are some sides that some of us have been privileged also to be introduced to. And I want to make this example of when Nico started to be the dean of that faculty. He would from time to time invite me to some of the meetings that we would have, and there would always be something to eat afterwards. So there was this morning that he called, and in my response, I already said, "Munus alweer gaan eet." But it also it just and so also he had a way of laughing, you know, in a very contagious way about the very small things in life. And these are the things that really had made me feel drawn to the person of Nico. He remembers the Northern Cape very well. He knows the kinds of things that people say. And when you have time and hang out with Nico, you will make you laugh about this province that we both come from. And so, Nico, I want to say on the occasion of your 60th birthday, that indeed we are privileged to have you as a gift to humanity. You are a theologian par excellence. You have a way of consistently pushing a point that you're convinced about. I know this issue of hybridity is even something that I now consider as a possibility because of the way that you would want to convince people to see things in your particular way. And so I would like to thank you as the gift to humanity, you as a person that we look up to, and also from time to time want to emulate just because of your sheer humanity. Happy birthday, and may God bless and keep you for many more. I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Prof. Chaka. Prof. Nico Koopman, you heard for yourself that you converted Rodney. So thank you so much, Prof, for acknowledging that, and we really appreciate your kind words to Prof. Nico Koopman. Ons gaan weer gaan eet na hierdie oomblik. The moment that we go out, we will celebrate Nico. Now we will call upon our Professor Robert Vosloo, who's a professor in systematic theology and colleague in our Department of Systematic Theology and Ecclesiology. He is a former departmental chair in STE, Systematic Theology and Ecclesiology. Professor Robert Vosloo, I will call upon you, colleague, to unmute and also open your video and say some few words to Prof. Nico Koopman.
Thank you very much, Sipu, and it's a great honor for me also to say something on this occasion. Nico, Scotty, colleagues and friends, I've been fortunate to know Nico since the early 1990s, when I was also a doctoral student at the University of Western Cape, studying under Professor Dirkie Smit. And from that time onwards, I often had the privilege to attend many conferences and workshops with Nico and to discuss many themes in theology and talk about life in general. And also South Africa and our shared but often divisive past. And on one of these occasions, at one of these consultations, we actually decided to write a book together, or maybe we were asked to do that. And this book was later published in Afrikaans. It had the title Die Ligtheid van die Lig, the lightness of the light. And it dealt with the theme of moral orientation in a time of transition. Now, when the book was published, Nico wrote in my copy the following words. He first thanked me for our friendship, and then he added, saying, dit is deel van my vuurmaakhout vir oudag. This is part of my firewood for old age. Now, I was not yet accustomed to many of these Nicoisms and the way he often speaks. So initially, I was a bit perplexed with what this vuurmaakhout vir oudag would mean. You know, admittedly that the book might not have been great, but I didn't felt it was a good idea, you know, that this should be used for firewood. But of course, that was not what Nico meant. What he meant was that what we've experienced in our collaboration, in our friendship, was something that he will treasure, something that he will keep in his memory. And that also through that words, he sort of committed to a continuing friendship. And I realized that that is something that I would like to treasure. And this continued also when we became colleagues here at the Faculty of Theology within the department. And we sort of added more firewood for our later memories. And this image of a fire, of a cozy fire, is since I came to know Nico, something of an image that I associate with him. The idea of a fire that attracts people, like you know, a kachelvuurtjie or a braaivleisvuur, where people want to talk, where people are drawn to, where people feel that they can share their common humanity, where they can laugh, where they can break bread, where they can also talk about their hurts and their pain and share something thereof. So for me, that has been part of my experience of Nico, that it's this aspect that when you are drawn into communion with him, into this place of fellowship, that you experience something of this warmth. And many others have expressed something of this. And maybe I can also just add to this, Nico, and for something that I'm also appreciative of, that what I think draws me and also others into your presence, into this experience of the habitat that you create, that forms also our habits, is not merely the warmth of your personality, but I think I would like to add that is that we sense in this fellowship, in this presence, that we are dealing with something that really matters. And we are drawn to that because we realize that theology matters, that the gospel matters, that unity and justice and reconciliation, these things matters, because friendship matters. And above all, as we have heard, that love matters. So Nico, I want to congratulate you and also just add that on a personal level, I'm also very grateful for our friendship, and much has been said about these words in verbondenheid, and I would also like to echo that. One of the things that I want to add to that is that I've often been, my heart has often been warmed by the fact that in our email correspondence, you would so often use the words, my brother, communicating something not to be taken for granted, given also the history of our country and our churches. And therefore, I just want to thank you and congratulate you, my brother, also for including me as your brother. Thank you and congratulations.
Thank you, Prof. Vosloo, for your words. And now we almost come to an end of our session. Prof. Nico Koopman, now it's really about time that I will call you to give a response to all the colleagues and friends who are speaking here. But one thing that we miss as a family, as also at the Faculty of Theology, is your humbleness. The open arms that you always show us, the arms that are welcoming and also the arms that are showing love and embrace. This is what we miss in your verbondenheid, Prof. Nico. And you know that ek is mos 'n huiskind vir al hierdie tye. I was really taking care of my brother and sister Marlies and William, taking them from school, bringing them home safely while you are teaching. So we miss those days, the love that you have for this family and also for our Faculty of Theology. But behind you, I want to echo the word, say, behind every successful man is a woman. Behind her is his wife. Thank you so much, colleague. The platform is yours for response.
Thank you, colleague Sipu. I must start first with, before I go to the word of gratitude to you as a program director for today, and to everyone who organized this great event. I will convey to you what I told the manager in my office, colleague Tanya Erison, this afternoon when she sent through detailed program to me. I responded to and said, what's going on here? You are very disloyal, and I have activated a disciplinary process of disloyalty, and it's going to the dean and to the director of the Beyers Naudé Centre. I was not aware of this. I heard from people. I sensed something since my birthday. Some people say, we see next week, Nico, we see at the celebration. And I was wondering, Scotty also at home said nothing. Tanya said nothing. But this is great. This is a great disciplinary process to start. May I start, colleagues, really with a word of gratitude and say thanks to our dean and the faculty, the staff and students of the faculty, and the director of the Beyers Naudé Centre and the colleagues of the center for organizing this really great day. May I say thank you specifically to all of you present here from Stellenbosch University, from other campuses, from churches, various churches, leadership, people in leadership in the churches, friends of mine, and colleagues locally and globally. A word of thanks to you and a word of gratitude to Scotty, to my children who are also watching, to the broader family, and to all my friends. So much gratitude to each one of you. And then I would like to move to our speakers, starting with Dirkie. To Dirkie, Sipu once, when he was busy with his studies, doctoral studies, and this I always do with postgraduate students especially, I would say, I think you must just go first and see what Dirkie has written about this theme already. Also look in detail at his footnotes, and I think that's a good place to start. When I communicated this once to Sipu, he said, hey, Nico, man, you know, hy's mos ons almal se papa. So in a sense, Dirk, you're still young, but this is the respect that we have for you over decades. 40 of my 60 years, there was verbondenheid and is verbondenheid between us since the days that you started as a young lecturer in your late 20s at the University of the Western Cape. And today, again, you help me to understand myself better and to go back and to look deeper at the implications of what I say and what I mean. But every time when you spoke today, I said, yes, that's what I tried. That's what I tried to say. So you gave me, once again, homework. I must go and look deeper. And thank you for the lecture and for the article. And then to our rector, colleague Wim, it's just great that you are present here. And we appreciate you so much. This university, you lead us through through turbulent times, every year of your first term and now your second term also. There's turbulence, there's challenges that we must face, but you do it with compassion. And colleagues, when we formulated the new values of the university, Wim, as a physician, said, listen, we must put it on one end, it's e-care, so it's excellence, it's compassion, it's accountability, it's respect, and it's equity. And then we had to struggle with translating compassion into Afrikaans and use barmhartigheid, bewogenheid, mededoe, all those words, ontferming. And Wim then reminded us about dearness. And you reflect dearness, and that dearness is so in line with one of the most important documents, examples of indigenous knowledges on the continent of Africa, namely the Confession of Bellard, 1986. And Bellard says we are united, Article 1, to work together for reconciliation and overcoming alienation, and it's Article 2, and then Article 3, to work together for ontfermende gerechtigheid, deernisvolle gerechtigheid. We appreciate you, colleague Wim. And then, colleagues, I would like to move also to our other speakers. Colleague Rudolph, thank you for our South-South cooperation and for working together on how do we do public theology in so-called post-liberation context. Colleague Setri, that you are here. You have a long bond with us, and thank you as this great ecumenical church leader that you could be here today and that we can work so closely with you. I'm glad that we can now, in your Secretary General days at the World Communion, work even closer together. My former dean, colleague Elna, thanks Elna for what you said, and thank you that you help us to form partnerships in working for gender justice. We need it even more now than before. Nadia, may I say Nadadu? We come a long way, Nadia, and thank you for who you are, for your brilliance and for your compassion, your pathos for justice. We look forward to what you will still do at this university and in broader church, religious, and societal life. We appreciate you. Colleague Walter, recently I said when I was undergoing major surgery in 1997, I was really embraced by all, by people sitting here today. But one of the things I remember is how you, just one day when you saw me in my process of recuperation and you kissed me on my hand. We were sitting in church together, you turned around and you didn't greet, you just kissed my hand. I can't forget that. It was symbolic of the care of people. Colleague Heinrich, we come a long way. 5 years ago when I celebrated my birthday, or 6 years ago, we did it in Berlin, and you were that evening the host who said, we will celebrate Nico's birthday here in the heart of Berlin. And that signifies the communion, the friendship. Dirkie Smit said, Nico, you will meet Heinrich in Princeton, and we must really foster cooperation with him. I think he's the type of person whom we really should work with. When I just met you, after 5 minutes, I turned to Dirkie on one side and said, Dirkie, man, we must work with Heinrich. He has energy, he has love, etc. So thanks, Heinrich, that we can grow old together doing theology. Then Renier, baie dankie. Thank you, Renier. You come a long way. You studied in Germany, completed your doctorate there, came back to South Africa and worked for a public theology, worked to better the life of so many. And it's challenging times, Renier, but we're journeying with you. And then I would like to thank Rhoda Rodney. I'm glad we're getting closer on hybridity. So let's continue that discussion. But we highly appreciate you. And thanks, Rhoda, that you made the time available to be here today. We also mourn with you. The past weekend, you buried your father. And we look forward to the work that we will still do together. And I conclude with the speakers. Robert, baie dankie man. Really, we've come a long way. We did 2 books together already, and that symbolizes our journey together. And I appreciate what you said about Broer. I'm glad you highlighted that specific aspect, and what Dirkie was saying resonates so well with me also. There is something also of a longing in using expressions like unverbondenheid, broer, sister. And maybe I must now also use the opportunity to say, Elna referred to it, that I shorten names, and really with no negative motive, but it feels to me I'm too formal when I just say Robert, or when I just say Dion or Reggie, or even Wim. Scotty already asked me, Nico, how do you change Wim's name? But Wim will know. I use various expressions. So colleagues, bear with me. In conclusion, when I now this afternoon then heard about this, Leslie van Rooyen and I had a quick interaction, and I say, Leslie, I'm a bit nervous about this, man. The focus is now on me. And then Leslie said, Nico, you simply just enjoy it. Celebrate. We are used to the notion of I am, therefore. I think, therefore I am. I do, therefore I am. I perform, therefore I am. I give, therefore I am. And it's a bit hard to say, I receive, therefore I am. And on my birthday, I experienced the receiving. And today, I experience the receiving. And maybe we can also rephrase a classic prayer. It is not only from giving that we receive, but it is also perhaps from receiving that we give. And today, colleagues, I have received. This is indeed firewood for the future. This is indeed I received that prompt me to go forward. And we really need to keep in mind, our rector likes to say, no man, don't say you're 60, say 18 plus 42, to say there's energy. I still go forward. When Dr. Ellen Busak turned 60, my daughter Marilee said, Daddy, is Uncle Ellen 60 already? And so I conveyed it to Doc, and he enjoyed it. But then I also said, Doc, you are lucky. In your case, people say, is he 60 already? In some other cases, people will ask, is he 60 only now? I really hope I'm in the first category. Reggie, colleagues, I belong. Therefore, I am. Thanks for this gift that you and your colleagues had bestowed upon me today. I will always carry it with me. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Prof. Nico Koopman, for your response, and really, we really appreciate you, and we always love you. And Obi sent me a message for you. It's a very nice long message we will share with you. We couldn't really do messages on the chat box, colleagues, but we will. I will announce what will happen next after Professor Reginald's prayer. But at the moment, I really want to really thank the team that worked with me on the program, especially Marita, for the hard work that she has done in terms of the invites, keeping everything together, the program the recordings that he has done, the lectures that were done by Prof. Dirkie Smit and others who were recorded. Thank you so much, Marita, for all the hard work, and the Lord will bless you. And Prof. Nico Koopman, blessings to you and your family. We always love you at the Faculty of Theology, and you will always be our brother. Together with your house, we really appreciate you. And Scotty, thank you so much for keeping Nico and really making Nico looking so beautiful every day and looks like a young man every day. Thank you so much for the support that you are giving to Prof. Nico Koopman. Thank you so much for that. Now I will call upon Professor. Okay, Prof.
Can I say, you know that, Obi, you must send me his message afterwards. But when I was lying there in a hospital, he did two things. The one is I was asleep because of the strong medicines, and he sat in front of my bed, and we watched the Springboks versus the All Blacks test match in the hospital, but I fell asleep, and if I wake up, he was still sitting there. But then he did this one thing. He's my cousin. We grew up like brothers. He came with biltong, that nice South African snack that you cannot translate. And he was giving it to me, but it was still nil per mouth for me. So I said, Obi, but I cannot eat this. And so he said, okay, just smell how nice it is, so you enjoy at least that. And then the sister came in and saw what Obi was doing with me, and she scolded at him and wanted to drive him out of the hospital. I called her back and said, sister, please come back. I said, if he was lying here now, I would have done the same to me. And the sister got furious at me, and she said, you Northern Cape people, I don't understand your logic.
Thank you so much, Prof, for that. Thank you so much. Now I'll call upon our Dean, Professor Reginald, to conclude this session with a prayer. And after that, please, ladies and gentlemen, don't leave. There is an announcement to make. Prof. Reggie?
Thank you, Sipho and Kos Kakulu Kreha. We will do one of the prayers of Professor Koopman, the prayer for today. I think that is appropriate. And I will first do the Afrikaans, and then I will also do an English version, English translation. Let us pray. Heer, hou ons in bewarende hande, sparende hande, bedarende hande. Hou ons in u strelende hande, u helende hande, in u troostende hande. Ja, Here, laat ons te midde van slagting u streeling ervaar, te midde van afstand u sagte aanraking. Dankie dat ons kan sing. He touched me, oh, he touched me, and my life, it will never be the same. Lord, keep us in your caring hands, your sparing hands, your calming or soothing hands. Keep us in your caressing hands, in your healing hands, your consoling hands. Lord, let us in the midst of slaughter, the midst of pain, experience your hands. In the midst of distance, your soft touch. Thank you that we can sing, he touched me, oh, he touched me, and my life, it will never be the same. In saamstappende verbondenheid. Amen.